Hello everyone and welcome to Agents Insurance and Stonewood Financial's webinar today. I'm Barry Wilkin, CEO of Agents Insurance, and joining me today is Neil Wilding of Stonewood. Many of you have already been in our webinars and have received from me the book, The New Rules of Retirement Savings, written by Martin Ruby, the founder of Stonewood. If you don't have this book at the end of this webinar, call or email me and I will get this fabulous book to you. Reading this book will open your eyes and mind to new money creating opportunities in the IUL arena. Today we will seal the deal on how with Stonewood's IUL software you can find more clients, get more referrals, and write more premium with our tax-free solutions. With this software package, you will create proposals that make sense. Your IUL proposals can now be explained in 6 simple numbers, where today you are telling the story to your clients on a 40-page illustration from home office that is complicated for your clients to understand. As Neil says, Stonewood software makes IUL sales easy for the agent, and the proposals make IUL easy for your clients to understand. This software package is offered to you by us through AIS and through Stonewood for our producing partners at a low discount rate. This program is going to help you analyze, compare, and strengthen the savings, retirement, and tax-free planning for your clients. Let me at this time introduce to you Neil Wilding from Stonewood Financial. Neil, I thank you and the support that Stonewood has given Agents Insurance, and the floor is yours.
Barry, really appreciate the time today and the kind introduction, and certainly appreciate the partnership that we've just formed with AIS and your whole team. So what we're going to do today, like you said, is I appreciate you mentioning that book. The book is really just a small piece of an overall program. So we're going to let everybody watching the webinar today. We're going to give you a peek into what this program looks like. But before I go into that, just some housekeeping issues. I want to try and keep this interactive, but the way we're going to do that is just leveraging the technology that we have here. You're listening to the webinar now. It's playing through your computer, and on your screen is a chat box, and that's where you can ask your questions. So Barry's going to play moderator, and as questions come in, we'll probably just build out a list of them, and as much time as we have, we'll try and get to as many as your questions as possible. And then anyone that we don't get to, we'll follow up with, and make sure that we have everything answered for you. So let's go ahead and get started. The topic today is we call it the New Rules of Retirement Saving. It's a marketing program that we've launched in partnership with Barry and Agents Insurance. And what the program is designed to do is it's allow you to identify the risks in your client's current strategy, right? Step one in any program is going to be to help you find people and give you stories to tell as you find them. And so what we're going to do here, we're using Index Universal Life as an alternative to other savings instruments. So first we're going to introduce these risks and help you talk to clients about the risks that they face today that weren't quite present 10, 20, 30 years for past generations of saver. And then we're going to introduce IUL as a nice strategy to help overcome those risks. Sounds pretty simple, right? And then finally, and this is where things get really unique, Barry mentioned our software. And what we're going to do is going to allow you, the agent, to create reports that help your clients take action. And so those reports that most people use today, as Barry said, are illustrations, old school illustrations. And he was kind in saying that it was 40 pages. The first IUL illustration I ever saw, I kid you not, was 78 pages long. So those things can just get longer and longer and longer, because the more you can just run all these additional reports through these carrier software, and it just creates these rows and columns of data, of numbers and disclosure, and it's an absolute nightmare to try and sell from. But there are some important information. There's some important information in there, right? There's a few key figures, and so what the software is going to do is going to help you extract those relevant numbers and then infuse it into a storyboard document. that helps tell the narrative that you tell in the prospecting phase and in the one-on-one meeting phase, and then as you go to close business. So now let's go ahead and start with talking about how we, and what type of risks we introduce. And really, these risks become the foundation for the discussion that you have at every level of the sales process. And it all starts with first is structural risk. And today's generation of saver is really faced with a large burden of owning their own retirement plan. And by owning it, it means that it's also their job to fill it up. Past generation of savers had their employer to help them out with pensions or even with nice company matches inside a 401k. You had the government where you're counting on Social Security. But future generation, today's generation of saver and future generations don't have the luxury of having other people help us out. It's all on our own. And we talk about this structural risk because so many people, when they show up to their first day on the job, they fill out some paperwork and they fill out their 401k and their health insurance, and they just go on about it without really thinking about it. Well, most people don't realize that a 401k is not a product. It's not a form, it's not a retirement product. What it is a section of the tax code. And by saving inside that section of the tax code, it potentially could introduce them to structural risk of their plan. And by flipping a few pages later in the tax code to where we find life insurance could help you overcome some of that structural risk. And so that's what we mean by structural risk, and that's one of the pillars of the marketing program. That second risk is market risk. And even though we're hitting all-time highs on different indices, I've heard several people refer to this market as the most feared bull market in the history of this business. And what that means is that savers today have their head on a swivel. And that's a term you usually hear in football or basketball, that you have to have your head on a swivel because you never know when you're going to get hit. And so that's how savers are today. And so even though you've got these euphoric up markets, we still need to find ways to mitigate risk in the way that we're saving through growth and protection. And the power of indexing inside Index Universal Life is a great way to do that. And then finally is tax risk. And this is pretty self-explanatory, right? But we want to help people kind of find the way to save, the most efficient way to save possible. And we all know that tax-free is a far more efficient way to save than tax-deferred. Well, what our program is going to do is give you the tools to help execute on that. And so that's the story, right? So you've got structural risk, market risk, and tax risk. And so what we do is we create that story in our marketing program and allow you to communicate it in multiple ways and in all aspects of the sales process. So that starts in prospecting. And so for a lot of people, that means trying to get some people together in the form of a group. And that could be formal dinner seminars. It could be through a radio show. It could be through just your networking. Maybe you have an existing client that can get you access to a room of 10, 15 people in a conference room. Whatever it may be, you've got to have the tools to execute in that setting. And so by working with Stonewood, we're going to give you not one, but 3 different seminars that you can actually download and use in the sales process. And those group presentations, those PowerPoint presentations, they're going to focus on that story that I just told, based on structural risk, market risk, and tax risk. Now, the goal of a group presentation is really just one thing, which is to get people in your office and sitting across from you to be able to execute then one-on-one. And this is where our program really gets unique, is because we've got these materials that are going to help you close business. And it's going to continue that story of structural risk, market risk, and tax risk. And you know how this is. People need to hear things 4 or 5 times before they take action. And so we're going to tell a similar story through different medium, right, and through different ways. And so these one-on-one materials are going to really help you execute. And so we've got software, and I mentioned this here at the beginning, that's going to help you do that and create these reports that you can then show folks. And so I think now would be a good time to go in and show you what I mean by what this software does. And so let's just assume that you hosted a successful group meeting, whether it was a seminar or a workshop, and someone actually came in afterwards. And this is, this would be, in most situations, if you've got a room of 30 people, you're going to get 10 to 15 buying units to come in and meet with you individually. And so let's just say that you used, I mentioned I have 3 different PowerPoint presentations. They're actually customized by age. And one of those presentations is for young professionals. And so the young professionals are going to be individuals that are really just starting to save for retirement. We're looking at future contributions, and we're looking to redirect those contributions from where they're going now into an Index Universal Life savings plan. And so let's just assume that, that Jane comes in. She's 42 years old. By the way, Jane is the star of our seminar. So when you see the seminar, the example that we use is this 42-year-old female. And so let's just assume, she's making $100,000, $150,000 a year, and we're looking to redirect 10% of that into a savings plan. So that's going to turn out to be about $1,000, not about, exactly $1,000 a year. And just like most examples, we're going to assume retirement at age 60. And so this is, when you've hosted a successful group meeting, without our program, you would probably call up Barry and say, Barry or Barry's team, I need an illustration, right? Run me an illustration for a 42-year-old. Well, you're going to continue that as a Stonewood subscriber, but you're going to run your illustrations a little differently. Because what we want to do is not just run one illustration to help show what the product looks like. What we want to do is create a range of expectations. Because what the illustration process is meant to do is to help answer the question, if history repeats itself, about what could you expect from this savings plan? Well, if history repeats itself, we're going to run an illustration based on just that, based on history. And that's going to be using the max illustrated rate. If you're familiar with IUL, you know that the regulators came in, I guess it's been a while ago now, and established some limits on what on how you could illustrate IUL. Well, I feel like the regulators actually did us a favor here, because what they did is they put their rubber stamp approval on a number that you could use to help answer that question if history repeats itself, about what could you expect. And so what we'll suggest is running an illustration based on the max illustrated rate. And that's going to do that, help create a historical scenario. And that's actually going to be your more realistic number. But we want to back it up. And what we also want to do is run a stress test. And that stress test is really meant to answer the question, well, what happens when things go wrong? And here, what we're going to use in our stress test is a situation based on the worst decade in the history of the S&P 500. And I'll show you what that story looks like here in a minute. But let's start with our historical scenario. And so you're going to run your illustration. Barry's team can do that for you, or if you like to run your own illustrations, you can. And then you're going to log into stonewoodfinancial.com, and there's a software wizard. And I'm going to save you those steps here on this webinar because I want to get to the output. But you're going to hit Generate Proposal. And what's going to pop up is 4 different reports. They're going to help you speak IUL in simple terms. And it's going to start with a client brochure that's going to, in a simple way, talk about why you would use IUL to save for retirement. By the way, it's going to follow that same story that we told in the seminar. And then, and I went too far there, so that's the client brochure. And then we're going to show a customized proposal. This is where we're pulling numbers from an illustration. And as Barry said, it's 6 numbers instead of 70 pages or 50 pages, however long your illustrations are. And then we're going to run that downside scenario report based on the worst decade. And then we're going to do a cost analysis. Now that one shocks people. They're like, well, wait a minute, life insurance, I thought that's why people don't buy insurance, because of the cost. Why would we want to focus on that? Well, actually, if you own the plan to its as you had planned in the illustration process. If you buy it at a certain age and keep it over time, it becomes one of the most efficient savings vehicles that you can own. But it's very difficult to speak to. So we've got a report that helps simplify that process as well. And what we find is people that use the software, it actually becomes the reason that people buy as opposed to an objection. And so let's now walk through some of the output here so you can see what we're talking about. And you're really going to see how we simplify the story. That client brochure, that's really your table setting document. And I've seen so many people make the mistake of trying to talk too much about all the features and benefits of IUL. You know, when you look through the product, you can make a pretty long list of all the benefits. It's a great product. It's a great place to save. It does so many things for so many different people. Well, here's the challenge. We can confuse people by going and hitting on too many of those. So what we suggest you do is keep it simple and stick to just 5 key attributes that every savings vehicle should have. First, you need to create an opportunity for meaningful growth. First and foremost, this is a savings plan. So we need to show that we can make money. And so in the brochure, that's what we help you talk about, is using IUL to create an opportunity for meaningful growth. But we're using the power of indexing here. So that means you also have protection. When markets go crazy, you can't give back what you've already made. Third is taxes. And we want to make sure that our clients are on the right side of the table when it comes to that discussion of the difference between tax-deferred and tax-free. And so IUL is going to put them on the tax-free side of the table. And we're going to give you the tools to help facilitate that discussion. Fourth is death benefit. Now, that's another one people get surprised about. Now, this is life insurance, right? But we know that we're using this to accumulate funds for retirement. And so a lot of people say, well, as soon as people find out this is really insurance, it makes them less interested. And I would always say, well, that just means you're not talking about the insurance in the right way. No, this is not a wealth transfer story, but that death benefit is a key attribute in the plan, because what that death benefit does is it allows this retirement plan to be self-completing in the eyes of tragedy. And no other retirement plan does that. It's a fantastic way to create a self-completing retirement plan in the eyes of tragedy. And so, of course, we want to talk about that. Why would you ignore it? It's one of your unique factors. And so that becomes one of the key attributes. And then fifth is flexibility. And that just talks about the fact that 59.5 and 70.5 don't apply here. And so this plan doesn't come with some of the strings attached that other retirement plans do. And we stop it right there. And so the brochure is going to give you the 5 key attributes. And then it's going to give you data to, or reports to back it up. And that becomes the customized brochure. And that's the story that we're telling here. And then you get into the reports and the customized proposal. Instead of flipping through 50 pages of illustration, let's go to 1 page. And let's just look at 6 key numbers. And here we are. Instead of showing the rows and columns of data, let's just get to what really matters. What's my death benefit? And that's our self-completing retirement plan. Now, this particular example was pulled up for a 42-year-old female. And, don't get too caught up in what the numbers are here. I'm just trying to show you a story. Because this is really just meant to be a representative sample of all the different carriers that we work with. And so your numbers might vary based on how you run your illustrations. But this particular example, you've got a death benefit for $375,000. That's your self-completing retirement plan. We're going to be putting in $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year. Remember, she was 42, so she's got 23 years worth to save. So that means she put in $276,000 while she's saving. Now, instead of looking at every year in the ledger, really what she wants to know is, how much is this going to be worth when I go to retire? Well, that answer, if history repeats itself, and this is based on that AG 49 illustration, is your 276 would grow to $626,000. And then what she also wants to know is, well, what's that going to mean to me in income? Well, there's actually a way to structure the illustration that can generate over $63,000 worth of annual income starting at age 65. And that's through using variable loans. And if you want to understand, how the loan process works in IUL, certainly reach out to your contact at Agents Insurance. But there's a great way where you can create significant income. Oh, by the way, net of fees, net of taxes. My 276 would grow to 626, and I could take out $63,000 a year and make it last to age 95. Now, remember what the first attribute I said was, which was creating meaningful returns? If they're thinking about doing their 401k or this, or a brokerage account or this, the way they judge the success of that brokerage account is through percent returns. Well, we need to be able to speak that language. So assuming that a death benefit was paid at age 90, so we're going to start this plan at age 42, we're going to start taking income at age 65, but my average internal rate of return on my money is 8.02%, net of fees, net of taxes. Is there really any other number you need to know on the illustration than what we just showed you? We want to show how much am I putting in, what's it going to grow to, how much can I take out, and what percent return will I get? And by the way, that 8% number, net of fees, net of taxes. We always talk to savers or agents and get them to talk to their prospects and ask this question. Think about what your 401k would have to do to beat that number. Now, I know there's a lot of software out there you can use to help calculate that number, but really you can do it in your head because all they need to know is a ballpark. If that number, 8%, is net of fees, net of taxes, to find out what my 401k would have to do to beat that number, we just kind of add them in your head. What are the average fees? We'll call it, a point and a half. So now we're at 9.5% of what the 401k would have to do, net of fees. Oh, and then taxes. Add in another, 2, 3%. Suddenly you're at 12% a year. How confident is anyone in their 401k to deliver 12% a year, year in, year out? Right? It's just a real powerful, simple way to show how IUL can be an efficient way to save. Well, let's take it a step further and just say, and I call this our money in, money out chart, and it's as simple as that. How much did she put in? $276,000. How much did she get out of it? A little over $2 million worth of benefit of taxes turned $276,000 into $2 million. Well, that's the upside, right? Well, a lot of things work when the market's doing well. People want to know that stress time when the market was bad and simulate how this plan would hold up in that market. Well, if you look back to 2000 to 2009, a lot of people call it the lost decade, the flat decade. What I like to call it in the history of this business. It was the first time ever that the S&P 500 was negative on average over a 10-year time frame. And that signified the worst decade in the history of the S&P 500. So what I'm going to do is I want to use that as the foundation for my stress test. But I'm not going to stop there because what kind of market followed that decade? A glorious run up, right? We've seen, we're breaking records left and right. Well, so for my simulation, I don't want to show a bad market followed by a good market. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate reliving the worst decade over and over and over and over again. So you can imagine what this stress test would do to plans tied to the market, right? Like 401ks and brokerage accounts. If we're averaging negative 1% year in and year out over multiple decades, those plans are doomed to fail. Well, that's the foundation for my stress test, except for one fundamental difference, is that I'm not going to stress test the market. I'm going to stress test an index plan. And the power of indexing didn't do negative 1% during that decade. In fact, the average index product did 5.17% during the worst decade. And that's the real power of of indexing and not having to give back what you made. And so I'm going to run a second illustration at 5.17. And that's going to be the same thing as simulating, reliving that decade over and over and over again. And so I'm going to run a second illustration at 5.17. I'm going to plug it back into the same software. And here we have that same death benefit of the self-completing retirement plan to the tune of $375,000. I'm going to be putting in my $1,000 a month. And so I contributed that same $276,000. Now I'm going to show the results. And these numbers are going to be lower than what we showed before. But think about these numbers in comparison not to the previous report, but to a savings plan tied to a market doing negative 1% a year, reliving the worst decade over and over and over again. My IUL plan would have taken $276,000 and turned it into $471,000. And I can turn that into a $30,000 net of fees, net of tax income in retirement, make it last to age 95, which would, assuming a death benefit was paid at age 90, returned me 4.93% on my money. Money in, money out, my 276 turned to 984,000, just shy of $1 million in a market simulation where I'm reliving the worst decade over and over and over again. When you show a client that downside stress-tested scenario, that's when they're going to say, sign me up for this, because now they're going to know that even when things are at their worst, this is a plan that can deliver for me. Now, the final objection that we're going to help you overcome is cost, and I mentioned that cost report, because what could happen so many times, right, is, and think about this, if you're watching this webinar, how many times has someone left the office thinking this is something that I want to do? You maybe even have scheduled underwriting and signed an app, and then they go quiet. And the reason they went quiet is because someone else got in their ear, or a talking head on the radio, or another advisor got in and said, oh, no, 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 you never want to use life insurance to save for retirement. That stuff looks good on illustrations, but it never meets that performance because that stuff is so expensive. Well, forget the fact that all the results we just showed you were net of fees. We still need to overcome this perception that life insurance is expensive. And so the way we do that is by comparing it in cost. And so we need to look at what other savings vehicles cost. Well, on average, a 401k is going to run 1.27%. And a lot of people I talk to, that number is actually on the low end. But that's a number we could source in the Wall Street Journal. The average managed account is 2.04%. That's an important number because a lot of the talking heads, a lot of the people that are getting in the ear of people saying never to use insurance because it's so expensive are fee-based or fee-only RIAs. And those guys on average are now charging 2.04%. So that's the cost of the talking head alternative. And it's important to know. And then, you know, I also put on the screen here variable annuities. You know, they're a pretty popular instrument. On average, they're now charging 3%. By the way, I'm not here to say those numbers are high or low. We're just trying to find numbers that we could source so that we could have a common discussion with how much the IUL costs. But the challenge is when we go to, there's no real blue box for IUL, because when I go to find out how much my IUL costs, well, I run my report and I've got loads, I've got cost of insurance, additional expenses. That thing just looks so expensive. But they're all quoted in dollar amounts. And so what my software is going to help you do at Stonewood Financial is convert all of those dollar amounts to a percentage. And we want to create the blue box that you can use to compare. Now, the way we do that is we add up every dollar in fees that you could pay in retirement. Or I'm sorry, every dollar in fees you can pay in your policy. And we're going to look at how much you charge, how much you have to pay in policy year 1, year 2, all the way into the policy year in which you turn 90. We're going to add up all those fees, and we're going to create a ratio of those fees to the cash surrender value. Now, by the way, that's exactly how every other fee is calculated, is that ratio of the total fees paid on an average basis to the cash value, to the account value. Well, a funny thing happens when you do that is that IUL, not only does it not look expensive, it looks incredibly low cost. And so just take a guess, and then we'll get to some questions here. But just take a guess of what you think that illustration. Just kind of write down on a piece of paper what you think that IUL policy would cost on average. And so remember, this is a policy where we turn $276,000 into $2 million worth of benefits. I bet you didn't write down 15 basis points. Like, that's eye-opening stuff here. So not only is it not expensive, it's actually one of the most efficient ways to save for retirement. So I've gone on for a while here, and so real quickly, you know, the way that you can make all of these tools yours is by logging into stonewoodfinancial.com. We're a subscription-based website, and on that website, you know, we're going to give you all the tools you need, as I said earlier, from prospect to close, and that starts with seminars and workbooks. You know, if you need, if you're doing radio, we'll help you give you scripts for that. Barry at the very beginning mentioned that book. You can actually order the book at cost. So if you're a subscriber to Stonewood, instead of paying $15 a copy on Amazon, you can get it for $3 a copy. That varies a little bit with shipping. And then you need the training and meeting scripts in order to be able to execute. So we've got all of that for you, handouts, and of course you can run as many of those customized proposals as you want. I didn't mention this before, but this is very important, is that everything that you're going to see, everything you see here is all complied at multiple levels. Anything that touches, well, anything that's on the site is going to be complied by an independent firm that we've hired that specializes in insurance compliance. And then finally, anything that has a dollar amount from a carrier illustration, that specific carrier has approved the content for use. And so when you put it all together, you've got the software, you've got the program, you've got training, you even have a dashboard to help you maintain all of your active cases. And of course, we've got ongoing education. And so the way this all works is we're a subscription-based website. And so that's going to include, you know, it's going to matter how you subscribe. We've got different ways you can sign up for the website. What most people do is they sign up for what's called a basic subscription, and that's going to include everything I showed you here. It's going to have the software, and it's going to have the full marketing program. That retails for $199 a month. And some people just, they don't want the whole program, they just want to get access to the software. And if that's the case, that's only going to run you $89 a month. But because we have a partnership with Barry and Agents Insurance, what we're going to do is we're going to give you a promotional code. And if you punch in that promo code when you sign up for Stonewood, it's actually going to cut the cost in half. Now, you do have to pay annually to get the discount, but it takes that price, $199 a month of our basic subscription, all the way down to $99.50. So really, there's no reason to go with the light subscription, because you can get everything in the program, including the software, for what works out to be $99.50 a month. So I had wanted to go about 30 minutes on this webinar, and I think we went past that a little bit, Barry. So maybe we can't get to all the questions that we wanted, but maybe now we can look into taking some questions. Before I hand it back to you, what I will say that all you need to do to get signed up is go to stonewoodfinancial.com. There's a really easy way. You can pick what program you want. That's where you can enter that promo code. And I should go back to it here. Jot it down, AIS, and then the word half. And that's the promo code that you need. Go to stonewoodfinancial.com. And of course, Barry's team, they all have that promo code. They can tell you how to get signed up as well. And so at this point, Barry, if your line is still live, if you want to maybe, if any questions came up while I was going, we can certainly get to those now.
Thanks, Neil. I appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody being on the call today. And please do get a hold of us. We'll help you with proposals. I'll get you that book as I promised. Neil, I do not show the questions on the screen. Do you have them in front of you? Because I've had a little audio problem. That you can answer a few?
Yeah, they did. They came through the chat box here. And in fact, well, one of the questions, gosh, it's funny, this question comes up all the time, but it's you know, and everyone's, this is like front and foremost with our industry right now. They ask about the Department of Labor and how does the software and these reports fall into new DOL restrictions. And so one thing that's really nice about our software is that if you are going to operate under the prohibited transaction exemption, PTE 8424, in some cases you might be acting as a fiduciary. If that's the case, then what's nice is you can actually create a signature page from Stonewood Financial from the report. Like when you go to run your report, you can check signature page. And what that's going to do, that's going to become your financial justification for the sale. So if you're operating under PTE 8424, then you're going to have your financial justification right there. And so you're going to print that out, you have your client sign it, you sign it, and you put it in the file. Now that doesn't replace the paperwork you have to fill out, but what it does is it gives you added ammunition for kind of helping protect yourself in a very litigious society, right? And so all of the reports that you run, you can do that signature page if you like. And if you have other questions about how the DOL works, I mean, one of the nice things about working with a world-class organization like what Barry's putting together is that they'll walk you through exactly how to transact your business, whether you're falling under that PTE 8424 or not. He'll take care of you there. I think I've got I've got a lot of questions actually, but I'm going to go ahead and take one more, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up the call. And so if we don't get to any of these other questions, we'll follow up with you via email. But this is an easy one. One of the questions we get all the time is what carriers are approved. I mentioned that if we're running illustrations from, those carriers actually have to approve our output in order for us to be able to use their name in our software. And so the carriers that we've currently working with, Minnesota Life, North American, Allianz, Life to Southwest, Pacific Life, some of the various carriers. But I'll tell you this, all the carriers that Barry works with, I think most of the main companies that he's doing business with are in our software. And some of those other names are really just there to help you compare a little bit. But all of those carriers are in the software, and we've got a process to follow to where if there's a carrier that you're used to working with that's not in the software, we've got a nice process that we follow in order to work with that carrier to get it complied. So why don't we go ahead and make that the final question? And as I said, if we didn't get to your question, you'll get an email from either my team or Barry's team to help follow up and make sure all your questions are answered. Barry, you got anything else before we wrap this up?
Well, I just want to thank you again, Neil, and guys and gals, believe me, this is one way to get into the retirement planning community if you're not doing it big time. And I think you're going to find from the Stonewood financial software, you're going to be able to double or triple your income by using the simplified version of how to understand the IUL marketplace. So at this time, I want to thank everybody for their time. I want to thank you again, Neil, and everybody have a good week and good selling. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.